Have you ever wondered if there's a hidden connection between the Bible and the Filipino people? Today, we're unraveling the biblical origins of Filipinos, a story that challenges everything you thought you knew about this remarkable nation in Southeast Asia. This isn't just another historical documentary. We're about to explore one of the most fascinating genetic and biblical mysteries of our time, how the descendants of Noah's sons shape the DNA of modern Filipinos. What we've discovered will revolutionize your understanding of biblical genealogy and Asian heritage. To bring you this groundbreaking analysis, we've spent months diving deep into ancient biblical texts, cross-referencing genealogical records from the book of Genesis and comparing them with modern genetic studies. We've consulted with biblical scholars, anthropologists, and genetic researchers to piece together this remarkable story that's been hidden in plain sight for centuries. By the end of this video, you'll understand the profound connection between Filipino ancestry and two significant biblical lineages, how ancient biblical migrations perfectly align with modern Filipino characteristics, why the Philippines' unique position in Asia may not be coincidental but divinely orchestrated, the spiritual significance of this heritage for millions of Filipinos worldwide. This isn't just about origins. It's about rediscovering a legacy that connects ancient scripture to modern science. So whether you're Filipino, interested in biblical history, or simply curious about human origins, this video will transform your perspective forever. The historical tape streaming of the Filipinos, a divine journey through time. Picture, if you will, a vast expanse of azure waters dotted with emerald islands, where the story of a nation chosen by divine providence begins to unfold. The historical tapestry of the Philippines weaves together threads of ancient migrations, biblical prophecies, and the hand of God guiding a people toward their destiny. Our story begins with the Negritos, the first children of these islands. These early inhabitants, with their dark skin and small stature, share a fascinating connection to the biblical narrative. According to Genesis 10:6-20, the descendants of Ham spread across various regions, and evidence suggests these early peoples may have been among those who ventured eastward after the Great Dispersion at Babel. Their presence in the Philippines marks the first chapter in a divine plan that would unfold over millennia. As we delve deeper into the archaeological record, we discover waves of Austronesian peoples arriving on these shores, bringing with them sophisticated navigation skills and agricultural knowledge. This migration pattern aligns remarkably with biblical accounts of post-flood dispersal, where the descendants of Japheth, particularly through the line of Tarma, moved across vast distances to establish new settlements. The timing of these migrations, roughly 403,000 BCE, corresponds with the period of global population dispersion described in Genesis 11. But the story takes an even more intriguing turn when we examine the establishment of early kingdoms. The system of datus, rajas, and sultans that emerged bears striking similarities to the governmental structures described in the Old Testament. Just as the Israelites had their judges and kings, these island communities developed hierarchical societies that reflected ancient biblical patterns of leadership and community organization. The arrival of Spanish colonizers in 1565 marks a pivotal moment in this divine narrative. Ferdinand Magellan's landing in 1521 wasn't merely a historical accident, it represented the fulfillment of a greater purpose. The Spanish brought Christianity to these shores, but they found a people whose ancient traditions and social structures already echoed biblical principles. The rapid acceptance of Christianity among Filipinos can be understood through this lens. They weren't simply adopting a new faith, but reconnecting with their biblical heritage. During the Spanish colonial period 1565-1898, we see a remarkable transformation. The Philippines became the only predominantly Christian nation in Asia, a distinction that seems preordained when we consider the biblical connections to their ancestry. The Spanish period, despite its challenges, served as a vehicle for fulfilling what appears to be a divine appointment, the restoration of Christian faith to a people whose ancestors had walked in the paths of the American period 1819-1846 brought another layer to this tapestry. The introduction of English and modern education systems allowed Filipinos to engage more directly with biblical texts, leading to a deeper understanding of their heritage. Even the brief but devastating Japanese occupation during World War II served to strengthen the Filipino people's faith, much like the trials faced by biblical nations. As we unravel these historical threads, we find something remarkable, a pattern that suggests divine orchestration. The Philippines' position as a crossroads of Asia, its unique cultural blend, and its eventual emergence as a Christian nation all point to a carefully crafted plan that began in the pages of Genesis. But perhaps the most compelling evidence of divine purpose in Filipino history comes from comparing ancient prophecies with modern genetic studies. Recent DNA analysis reveals a unique combination of markers that align perfectly with the biblical narrative of both Japhetic and Hamitic lineages converging in this archipelago. This scientific confirmation of biblical truth serves as a powerful testament to the accuracy of Scripture and the special place of the Filipino people in God's plan. As we begin to understand this divine tapestry of Filipino history, we must now turn our attention to an even more fascinating question. How do these historical connections reveal themselves in the biblical genealogy of the Filipino people? The answer lies in an intricate web of relationships that connects modern Filipinos directly to the patriarchs of old. The biblical genealogy of the Filipino people. In the aftermath of the Great Flood, as the waters receded from the earth, Noah's three sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, emerged to rebuild humanity. This pivotal moment in biblical history would set in motion a fascinating chain of events that would eventually lead to the birth of the Filipino people. Though this connection remained hidden in the shadows of time for millennia. Let us first journey to the time of Japheth, Noah's third son. The Bible tells us that Japheth's descendants would be enlarged and dwell in the tents of Shem, Genesis 9:27. This prophetic blessing held particular significance for the future of Asia. Among Japheth's sons was Gomer, whose own son Tarma would become a key figure in our story. Biblical scholars have long noted that Tarma's name carries a deeper meaning in ancient Hebrew, broken or pulled, a linguistic clue that would later prove significant in understanding Filipino origins. As Tarma's people migrated eastward, they carried with them distinct physical characteristics that would become hallmarks of many Asian peoples: almond-shaped eyes, straight black hair, and a lighter complexion. The biblical record suggests that these early migrations followed ancient trading routes, eventually reaching the shores of what would become Southeast Asia. Archaeological evidence supports this movement, with artifacts showing a gradual progression of settlements eastward from the Mediterranean through Asia. But this is only half of the story. The Bible speaks of another migration, one that would bring the descendants of Ham, Noah's second son, into the narrative. Ham's lineage, associated with the darker-skinned peoples of the ancient world, would play a crucial role in shaping Filipino genetics. The Book of Genesis records Ham's descendants spreading southward and eastward, establishing kingdoms and trading networks that would eventually reach the Philippine archipelago. What makes this dual ancestry particularly fascinating is how it perfectly explains the unique physical characteristics of the Filipino people. When the descendants of Tarma encountered the Hamitic peoples in the region that would become the Philippines, something remarkable happened. The blending of these two biblical lineages created a distinct genetic signature, the combination of Tarma's East Asian features with a darker complexion associated with Ham's line. This genetic merger wasn't merely coincidental. Ancient maritime trade routes, documented in both biblical and historical records, show how these peoples could have converged in the Philippines. The strategic location of the archipelago at the crossroads of ancient Asian sea routes made it a natural meeting point for these diverse populations. The biblical narrative takes an even more intriguing turn when we consider the timing. According to biblical chronology, these migrations would have occurred during the period of the Tower of Babel, when God confused the languages of humanity. Genesis 11:01, page 9. This dispersion of peoples coincides with linguistic evidence showing the development of distinct language families in Southeast Asia. including the Austronesian languages predominantly spoken in the Philippines today. But perhaps the most compelling evidence comes from modern genetic studies, which have revealed that Filipino DNA contains markers consistent with both East Asian and Austrasian heritage, a scientific confirmation of what the biblical record suggested all along. This remarkable confluence of biblical narrative and modern science provides a fascinating window into divine providence in human history. As these ancient bloodlines merged and flourished in the Philippine archipelago, they laid the foundation for a unique cultural identity that would later embrace Christianity with remarkable fervor. This divine orchestration of human migration would create a people uniquely positioned to become Asia's largest Christian nation. But that's a story that takes us into an even more fascinating chapter of Filipino biblical heritage. The story of Filipino biblical origin stands as a testament to the intricate way in which divine planning and human migration intertwine to create one of the world's most distinctive peoples. It's a narrative that bridges ancient scripture and modern identity, offering profound insights into both the physical and spiritual heritage of the Filipino people. This revelation connects directly to our next exploration, how these biblical roots manifested in the development of modern Filipino identity, shaping everything from physical characteristics to cultural practices that persist to this day. Modern Filipino identity through biblical lens. In the ancient pages of Genesis, a remarkable story unfolds that bridges millennia to illuminate the unique identity of today's Filipino people. Picture yourself standing at the foot of Mount Ararat, where Noah's Ark came to rest after the Great Flood. Here begins our journey through time, tracing the divine threads that would eventually weave into the tapestry of the Filipino nation. When Noah's sons Shem, Ham, and Japheth descended from the ark, they carried within them the genetic blueprint for all of humanity. But it's the fascinating convergence of two lineages that would eventually give rise to the distinctive features we see in modern Filipinos today. Let us first follow the path of Japheth's line through his grandson Tarma, son of Gomer. Biblical scholars have long noted that the name Tarma carries a profound meaning in ancient Hebrew, the broken or the pulled, which some scholars associate with the distinctive almond-shaped eyes characteristic of Asian peoples. The biblical record tells us that Tarma's descendants migrated eastward, following ancient trading routes that would eventually lead them to the shores of what we now know as Southeast Asia. But this is only half of the story. The Bible speaks of another great migration, that of Ham's descendants. While many associate Ham's lineage primarily with Africa, historical records and genetic studies reveal a fascinating pattern of migration through the southern routes, bringing these peoples into contact with the archipelagic regions of Southeast Asia. Here's where the biblical narrative intersects with modern science in an extraordinary way. Recent genetic studies of Filipino populations reveal a remarkable combination. Approximately 53% Southeast Asian and Oceanic genetics, consistent with Japheth's lineage through Tarma, and various other contributions that align with the historical movements of Hamitic peoples through maritime routes. Consider the physical characteristics of modern Filipinos, their rich brown skin tones ranging from light amber to deep bronze. This isn't merely a coincidence, but rather a beautiful manifestation of these ancient biblical lineages coming together. The almond-shaped eyes and straight black hair traditionally associated with Tarma's line blend seamlessly with the warmer skin tones and facial features that scholars attribute to Hamitic influence. But perhaps most compelling is how this dual heritage manifests in Filipino culture itself. The strong emphasis on family unity and respect for elders, deeply embedded in Filipino society, mirrors the patriarchal traditions described in Genesis. The Filipino concept of bayanyanan, communal unity and cooperation, echoes the biblical principles of community that both Japheth's and Ham's descendants carried with them through their migrations. In the realm of linguistics, we find another fascinating connection. The Austronesian languages spoken in the Philippines contain elements that scholars have traced back to ancient trading routes, the very routes that biblical accounts suggest were used by both Japheth's and Ham's descendants in their eastward migration. As we reach the climax of this revelation, consider this. The Philippines stands at a unique geographical crossroads where these ancient migration routes converged. The archipelago's strategic position made it the perfect meeting point for these biblical lineages to come together, creating what we now recognize as the Filipino people. The evidence becomes even more compelling when we examine ancient artifacts discovered throughout the Philippine archipelago. Archaeological findings reveal a pattern of cultural fusion that perfectly aligns with the timeline of these biblical migrations. From ancient pottery styles that show influences from both northern and southern trading routes to early writing systems that bear markers of both lineages, the physical evidence supports the biblical narrative in remarkable detail. This understanding of Filipino identity through a biblical lens doesn't just satisfy academic curiosity. It provides a profound sense of purpose and divine orchestration in the formation of the Filipino people. It suggests that far from being a random mixing of populations, the emergence of Filipino identity was part of a grand divine plan, one that would eventually position the Philippines as a crucial bridge between cultures and a beacon of Christianity in Asia. As we consider these biblical roots of Filipino identity, we must ask ourselves, how does this ancient heritage continue to shape the Filipino people's role in the modern world? The answer lies in examining the contemporary implications of this divine legacy. Contemporary significance. The living testament of biblical heritage. In the heart of Manila, as the sun rises over the historic Quiapo Church, thousands of Filipino Catholics gather for the Feast of the Black Nazarene. This scene, replicated across the 7,641 islands of the Philippines, tells a story far older than the Spanish missionaries who first brought Christianity to these shores. It's a story that begins in the ancient lands described in Genesis, where the descendants of Japheth and Ham first set forth on their divine-guided journey. Picture, if you will, the biblical era when the sons of Noah dispersed across the earth. As Tarma, son of Gomer and grandson of Japheth, led his people eastward, they carried with them not just their physical characteristics, the almond-shaped eyes and straight black hair we see in modern Filipinos, but also, meanwhile, the descendants of Ham, moving through ancient trade routes, brought with them the genetic markers that would give Filipinos their distinctive brown skin tone. This dual heritage manifests today in fascinating ways. Consider Maria Santos, a Filipino-American grandmother in Queens, New York, who maintains her family's tradition of Simbang Gabi, the 9-day novena before Christmas. When asked about her faith, she speaks of a deep knowing, an ancestral connection that transcends mere religious practice. It's as if our acceptance of Christianity wasn't just conversion, she explains, but a recognition of something our ancestors always knew. The biblical connection becomes even more intriguing when we examine the Filipino diaspora. Today, over 10 million Filipinos live and work abroad, carrying their faith and cultural heritage to every corner of the globe. This modern exodus mirrors the ancient dispersal of Noah's descendants, but with a profound difference. These modern-day Filipinos often become spiritual leaders in their adopted communities, fulfilling what many see as their biblical heritage as descendants of both Japheth and Ham. In the corporate towers of Singapore and the hospitals of Saudi Arabia, Filipino workers have created micro-communities centered around faith. They gather in small groups for Bible study, their dual biblical heritage giving them a unique perspective on Scripture. Their understanding of both Eastern and Western spiritual traditions, a result of their mixed biblical ancestry. This cultural synthesis reaches its apex in the Filipino concept of kapwa, a deep sense of shared identity that mirrors the biblical ideal of community. Dr. Jonathan Rivera, a theological anthropologist at the University of the Philippines, explains, "When we trace the Filipino sense of community back to its biblical roots, we see echoes of both Japhetic tribal solidarity and Hamitic familial bonds. It's as if these two biblical streams created a perfect confluence in Filipino culture. The climax of this story unfolds in how modern Filipinos are reclaiming their biblical heritage. In recent years, there's been a surge of interest among young Filipinos in understanding their spiritual roots. Bible study groups in Manila's universities aren't just studying Scripture, they're exploring how their unique genetic and spiritual heritage makes them particularly suited to be bridges between East and West, between ancient and modern. The explanation for this phenomenon lies in the perfect storm of historical, genetic, and spiritual factors. The Filipino people, carrying the genes of both Japheth and Ham, were positioned both geographically and spiritually to become one of the largest Christian nations in Asia. Their dual heritage prepared them not just to receive Christianity, but to transform it into something uniquely Filipino, while maintaining its biblical essence. As we witness this living testimony of biblical heritage in action, we must ask ourselves, was the Philippines' position as Asia's largest Christian nation merely a historical accident, or was it part of a divine plan set in motion when Noah's sons first dispersed across the earth? The answer may lie in how modern Filipinos continue to fulfill their unique role in the global Christian community, bridging ancient biblical heritage with contemporary faith, embracing the divine heritage. In the ancient city of Jerusalem, nearly 4 millennia ago, a profound story began to unfold that would eventually connect to the distant shores of what we now know as the Philippines. Picture the scene. As Noah's descendants gathered in the plains of Shinar, the divine plan for humanity's dispersion was about to reshape the world's population map. Among these peoples were 2 distinct lineages that would later converge to create one of the most unique populations in Asia. Let us transport ourselves to that pivotal moment when Tarma, a descendant of Japheth through Gomer, led his people eastward. The biblical account tells us of their journey, though not explicitly mentioning their final destination. Like master navigators reading ancient stars, they followed what Genesis describes as the Eastern Path, crossing vast territories that would later become the Asian continent. These people carried with them distinct physical characteristics: almond-shaped eyes, straight black hair, and a complexion that would become characteristic of many Asian populations. But this is only half of the divine tapestry. Simultaneously, another migration was taking place. The descendants of Ham, known for their darker complexions and robust physical features, were also moving across ancient lands. The Bible speaks of Ham's lineage spreading across various regions, and through careful analysis of Genesis 10:6-20, we can trace their movement through what would become maritime Southeast Asia. Picture the dramatic moment when these 2 mighty streams of humanity converged in the archipelago we now call the Philippines. It wasn't a chance encounter, but rather a divine orchestration that would create a people uniquely positioned to bridge different worlds. The timing of this convergence aligns perfectly with archaeological evidence of early settlements in the Philippines, dating back to periods that correspond with biblical chronology. The story reaches its crescendo when we examine the profound implications of this divine heritage. Consider how the physical characteristics of modern Filipinos bear testament to this biblical narrative. The perfect blend of Japhetic features through Tarma in their facial structure and the Hamitic influence in their skin tone. This isn't merely coincidence. It's the physical manifestation of a story written in the very genes of a people. This revelation carries even deeper significance when we consider the Philippines' role in spreading Christianity across Asia. The nation's unique position as the largest Christian country in Asia isn't just a historical accident. It's the fulfillment of a divine plan set in motion thousands of years ago. Just as the ancient Israelites were positioned at the crossroads of civilizations to spread God's message, the Filipino people, through their dual heritage, were perfectly positioned to bridge Eastern and Western cultures. Perhaps the most compelling evidence of this divine design comes from examining the Filipino people's natural affinity for faith and community. These characteristics, deeply embedded in their cultural DNA, can be traced back to both ancestral lines, the spiritual wisdom of Japheth's descendants, and the communal strength of Ham's lineage. This unique combination created a people who would eventually become one of the most spiritually receptive nations in Asia, embracing Christianity with remarkable devotion. As we stand in the present day looking back at this remarkable journey of faith and heritage, we begin to understand why the Filipino people possess such a unique position in God's grand design. Their story isn't just about the past, it's about a living legacy that continues to shape the world. The Philippines' role as a bridge between East and West, its strong Christian faith, and its cultural diversity all point to the fulfillment of a divine plan set in motion millennia ago. This brings us to the profound truth that modern Filipinos carry within them not just a genetic heritage, but a spiritual mandate. They are the living testimony to God's promise of bringing nations together, of creating a people who would embody both Eastern wisdom and Western faith. Their story reminds us that in God's grand design, nothing is accidental. Every nation, every people group has a divine purpose. As we conclude this exploration, we're left with a powerful realization. The origin of the Filipino people isn't just a historical footnote in the Bible. It's a living testament to God's intricate plan for humanity. Their journey from the plains of Shinar to the beautiful archipelago they now call home is more than a migration story. It's a divine narrative that continues to unfold in our modern world. As we close this remarkable journey through time and scripture, I want to leave you with a powerful thought. What if your understanding of your heritage isn't just about where you came from, but about your divine purpose in today's world? For Filipino viewers, this isn't just your history, it's your... The biblical origins of the Filipino people reveal something extraordinary. A divine orchestration that positioned this nation at the crossroads of East and West, creating a people uniquely equipped to bridge cultures and spread faith across Asia. But this story isn't finished. It's still being written, and you're part of it. I invite you to join this ongoing conversation. What aspects of your Filipino heritage resonate most deeply with this biblical narrative? How does this understanding of your origins change your perspective on your role in the world today? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your insight might be exactly what another viewer needs to hear. For our non-Filipino viewers, this exploration raises intriguing questions about your own heritage. Could your nation's story also be hidden within the pages of Scripture, waiting to be discovered? This is why we're creating this series, to uncover these profound connections that shape our understanding of who we are and why we're here. Before we part ways, I want to express my heartfelt gratitude for joining me on this profound exploration. If you found value in uncovering these biblical connections, please consider subscribing to our channel. By joining our community, you'll be part of more fascinating discoveries about the biblical origins of peoples around the world. Hit that notification bell to ensure you don't miss our next revelation. You never know which nation's divine heritage we might uncover next. Remember, understanding our origins isn't just about looking back. It's about recognizing our purpose and embracing our role in God's continuing story. Until our next exploration, may you walk confidently in the knowledge of your divine heritage. God bless you all, and I'll see you in our next biblical investigation.